This is the Trek Fuel EXe. It's a mid-powered e-bike with a pretty killer spec and a nice quiet motor. This is the 9.7. And what you get there is a carbon frame with an SLX XT drivetrain, some Fox suspension in the Rhythm up front and the Float X in the back. It has the TQ motor that's silent or nearly silent, as well as some nice Bontrager Line Comp 30 wheels and some Team Issue XR tires. I would love to see at least a heavier rear tire, especially with such a hefty bike. This is a Fuel EXe 9.7. So this is an e-bike. We're gonna start with how it climbs. And yes, it has a motor, so that's pretty nice. But the more important things are definitely gonna be that efficiency as well as the climbing position for more technical stuff. And being that it very much mimics the regular EX, this thing is a phenomenal climber. Everything from technical stuff, tight switchbacks, and the loose things, it does exceptionally well. It has developed quite the creak as of the last ride, so this time it wasn't the best, but other than that, as far as climbing goes, this is a great bike for that. But how does it compare to other e-bikes? So it is significantly less power than some full power ones, but with the weight, you don't totally notice that. And the one thing that I really notice is when you are climbing more rocky and technical and having to ratchet up things, it doesn't feel like a boat anchor as soon as the motor turns off. It keeps going, floats a bit, and then when you re-engage the pedals, you get that extra bit of energy. So that's kind of the big benefit I found to it, is climbing technical stuff. You don't have to keep the pedals moving to keep it going uphill.
Climbing conclusions. It's what I expected and maybe better. It was quiet as advertised, which isn't completely silent, but quiet enough that you rarely notice it. Around switchbacks and up technical terrain, it outshined full power e-bikes because of the weight and climbing position. The power is good, specifically at a place like Tokol here in Washington, meaning short mellow climbs. It wasn't hard to keep up with full power e-bikes. However, on steeper, longer climbs, I was no match. Once at the top, I felt great and was not very tired, but I was only able to shave 30 minutes or so off a 3-hour ride, and the battery would be dead anyway, so I wasn't going to ride anymore. Going out for an hour ride, generally I would save about 10, maybe 15 minutes. The geometry is pretty much what is currently expected. For size large, the 483 reach is good, and the 629 stack is higher than the regular EX, and I generally prefer a higher stack. A 76.8 degree seat tube makes for a solid climbing position, and the 440 chainstays make for a 1247 wheelbase that's stable at speed with good traction on the climbs.
So here's one of the areas this bike really shines.
Trek released the Fuel EXe last fall as a mid-power lightweight e-bike. It was pretty exciting at the start, and the idea of an e-bike that was silent and weighed just a bit more than an enduro bike was intriguing. Fast forward to the spring, and these things were making it into the hands of customers. I received mine in February. It was to be a gift for my dad, and I was stoked to get a ride on it.
This is where I found the mass to be the biggest issue. The flat, really technical pedally areas. It actually seems to work better without the motor on, because you don't bog down when the motor kicks off. But That's going to be a problem for most riders, regardless. A bit more of an incline where that motor stays engaged, or a downhill, and this thing is unstoppable.
Where I really enjoyed the EXe was on the descent. I've gotten to ride numerous e-bikes, and they're all fun, but the downhill experience is definitely different. This descends more like a trail bike, and it jumps the same as well. Mellower descents, the EXe carries good speed and is playful on the trail. When things get steep and rowdy, the new Fuel EXe suspension, like the recently updated regular EXe, took everything I threw at it. The suspension remains active, even under heavy braking, and while you cannot slack this bike out like the regular EXe, it felt stable at speed and on the steeps.
Whew, not the usual line there.
The bad. I only really had 2 disappointments, but the second one was pretty big. First off, the build. I picked this build because I thought it was the sweet spot between easy upgrades and out-of-the-box performance. I stand behind that, save for the tires. The Bontrager tires are fine, but on a bike over 7K, they should be better. The compound is very hard, which in Colorado can be good for a rear tire, but the lack of control on a heavy e-bike is more noticeable when the tires are this bad. When I first had the bike, I rode it on my own wheels and tires as I didn't want to hand it over with worn out tires and dented rims. And after riding with the stock setup, well, you can see in the video, but long story short, I flatted first ride. I've had better luck with the Bontrager SE5 and 6 tires. I'm not sure about the compound, but with a bike at this weight, a heavier duty casing seems like a no-brainer. The second issue is where the Fuel EXe and Trek really disappointed me. The bike industry has a pretty horrible track record of releasing product only to have the customer wait, and wait, and wait. This is not new, and while COVID could be partially to blame, this was an issue well before. So I bought this bike for my dad, and he waited and waited. It finally arrived in February. The plan was to bring it to him in Moab in May. In the meantime, I would ride it, and he visited a couple times to ride it out in the Pacific Northwest. So after getting the bike back to Colorado, he got maybe 4 rides before it had to be taken to the shop. After way too much time, they decided the issue was the motor. After much more time, the shop received the motor, and he was eventually charged for the warranty. All of this time he was without a bike, and summer was quickly passing. To add insult to injury, the climbing noise at the start of the video, well, that was the motor coming loose. So he was charged for the warranty, and it doesn't even appear that was done well. It's one thing to wait 6 months for a product. It's another thing entirely to finally receive that product and to have to wait more than a month because the company could not support it. I've had good luck with Trek's warranty in the past, but this experience was pretty disappointing. Who's this bike for? My dad, for one. If you want to keep up with your friends on regular bikes without sacrificing on the descent or waiting for them at the top, it genuinely fits that bill. I have friends that have moved to e-bikes. Now they only ride with other e-bikers or alone, and I get it, but riding with friends is a huge part of biking for me, and these mid-power bikes do a great job of bridging that gap, rather than jumping right over it. It also would make a great tool for training, because it rides so much like a non-e-bike. Similar to how riding a resort can make you a better downhiller. This e-bike gets you laps without tiring you out. If you're racing enduro and want to give your legs a break in the days before the race, this e-bike fits the bill. Final thoughts. The first time I ran this bike out of battery, I was a little concerned. But then I looked down and saw I still had most of the cassette left. So I just shifted and continued my ride. This bike lived up to much of its hype, and if Trek can get past the reliability issues, then I think they have a hit on their hands. Accessibility is very important in our sport, and e-bikes, as long as you ignore the price, can help. Jokes aside, climbing is hard, and getting past that is important for getting more people on bikes. So whether it's e-bikes, chairlifts, or shuttles, get out there and ride.